And hello, car lovers, and welcome to the C&C Auto Show. I am Aaron Clements.
I'm John Ryan.
And our goal is to give you some information that will make your car, truck, or SUV safer, more dependable, and to make it last longer for less money and less hassle. Before we get started, we want to say that our hearts and our prayers go out to all of those affected by the terrible flooding in Texas and Louisiana. And all of you there are a true inspiration to our entire country for the way that you're all pulling together to save and comfort others and your neighbors and all the things you're doing. It is a true inspiration. And please remember also that all of your fellow Americans will be there with you. Mm-hmm. We're there to help. Okay, we are here to take your phone calls at 706-863-5800. That's on Saturday mornings, 8:05 to 10 Eastern. And at that time, you can catch us live on iHeartRadio, WGAC 95.1 FM. And you can also watch us live on Facebook. Just go to C&C Auto Show. And we invite you to join us on the show. And if you're looking for a good, dependable auto repair facility, go to NapaAutoCare.com and just hit that little search box in the top right-hand corner. Really, just about anywhere that you're located. Just bring that up and punch in your zip code or your city, and you'll see a list of some very fine automotive repair facilities. John Ryan, are we ready to fire it up and take off?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we will. We have a great show planned, and along with taking all those questions, we'll be talking about something that's very important, especially for those that really want to get that 200,000 miles or more, usually more, out of their vehicle. And it's really kind of neat to see that now. And I see it so regular. I see cars that come in that's got 300,000, 325, and you look at these cars and they still look good, they drive good, and you feel safe, you feel like the car is just very dependable, and you wouldn't know it had that many miles unless you just looked at the odometer. Now, the way to do that is through great services on a vehicle, and that's one of the things that we'll talk about today is services that you can get on your car that make it last longer. So we will cover that, and we will also be answering those questions. Now, just before we go to the next step, which is the phone calls, we will lay a tech tip quiz neatly on the table.
All right. And
that way everybody can have a chance to think about those tech tip quiz. And if you're a winner, you know all the prizes. Most people that listen to the show know the many prizes. But the top part of the prize is the I Answered the Tech Tip Quiz golf shirt. Here's the question. Adrian and Billy are both 29 years old. Adrian was inside her house watching TV. Her husband, Billy, went out to her 2013 Ford Focus to check to see if it was due for an oil change. Something happened when he was checking the mileage that caused Adrian and Billy to go back to school for a year. What happened while Billy was checking the mileage in the Ford Focus? If you know the answer, give us a call. And John Ryan, who will we be talking to?
Well, let's go over to Danny.
Hey, Danny, welcome to the C&C Auto Show, and how can we help you today?
Good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for taking my call. My daughter just bought a 2004 Chevy Tahoe. It's in excellent condition and really well taken care of, but we're not sure if the transmission in that vehicle had ever been flushed. It has 180,000 miles on it, and I wanted to know if it would be wise to flush that transmission if it was for the first time now, or just forego it and wait until
it breaks.
Necessary.
Wait till it breaks.
Danny, that's a good question. That's a question we get quite often. My opinion, well, I guess I'll tell you my opinion, would be that it would be based on what the condition of the fluid looks like now. The reason I say is, of course, it's kind of an old, tale that if a vehicle has over 100,000 miles or 150,000, it's never been flushed, don't ever do it. Well, that's not necessarily true, mainly because of the way things are done now and the procedure that's involved in doing that. However, with it being closer to 200,000, I would change my opinion on that just a little bit based on the fluid that's in it. For instance, if you pulled the fluid out and it was just kind of borderline, it's got a little tint to it, it's a little darker than what it should be, I go for, my vote would be to flush it. If you pull that dipstick and the transmission fluid is just black, it's clearly dirty, it's never been flushed, there is some risk involved there. My guess is if that vehicle's got 180,000 miles and it's in the condition you're talking about, it probably has been flushed before. Now, there's one or two things you could do just to kind of get an idea if it's been flushed. There's several different ways to flush it, some better than others. One common one, of course, is to remove the pan and, change the filter and fill it back up and all that. So you could kind of look under there and see if the factory gasket is on the transmission pan. That will give you an idea if somebody has been into it or flushed it. But by far the best way, of course, is a complete fluid exchange. You get 100% of the fluid out, and of course, it's a piece of equipment that goes in line with the transmission cooler. Under the transmission's own power, old fluid is pumped out of the transmission into our tool, of course, our flush machine, and it pumps under a cylinder, and on top of the cylinder is new fluid, so it pumps it right back in. So again, I guess to answer your question, it really depends on the condition of the transmission fluid that's in it now.
And Danny, one of the things I was going to mention during the show, this is such a timely question, is one way that you can check is with a Kleenex.
Mm-hmm.
You know that?
Mm-hmm.
Is that weird? No, what you can do is, that one does have a dipstick. Now, this is for cars that have a dipstick. Pull the dipstick out and let a little bit of the fluid drip on a Kleenex. And if the fluid is nice and bright red, high probability your transmission fluid has been flushed in that length of time.
Right.
If it's kind of tinted, still got a red tint, but it's starting to get dark, that's a great candidate for a flush.
Mm-hmm.
If it's black, don't do anything because you're wasting money. But my guess is if it's driving good and feeling good, you'll probably see a little bit of a dark tint. And it is a good idea to flush it because you would prolong or you would add to the longevity of that transmission.
Okay. You could make that judgment call pretty well yourself if we brought the vehicle in.
Mm-hmm.
Also, what is the cost to completely flush a transmission?
Okay. Now, that will vary from place to place because some people do different services in with it. For instance, ours, we do some things as far as resetting the strategy, adaptive strategies and all that. But on average, ours runs roughly around $225. Now, when I say that, that's not going to be on every transmission because I wouldn't want someone with a CVT transmission in a Nissan to come in and think you can get the same thing because the fluid is much more expensive than that. But on that particular vehicle, it'll be in the range of $225 for a total fluid exchange and all the things that go with that service.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, fantastic. That was an education that I really needed to have. I know the importance of flushing a transmission, and it's the cost of flushing a transmission is the equivalent to about 100,000 miles of oil changes.
Yeah,
right.
And I tell people that the only drawback to doing a lot of transmission total fluid exchange is our major transmission work has went way down. we don't do that many anymore. No, it does help the transmission a tremendous amount. And Danny, that was a great question. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, John Ryan, it is already time for the first break.
Yeah, it is.
And that was a perfect question, a lead in for today's show.
It was.
I love that. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll mention one of the most important services that your car can have, and we will be talking to Robert with a 2011 Jeep Compass. We'll be right back after these messages. And welcome back to the C&C Auto Show. Oil is the main service still. For many years, people say keep your oil changed regular. That is absolutely true. Now, it is also true that on a lot of cars now, you can go longer than the regular 3 months, 3,000 miles.
Right.
Just my opinion, if you've got a standard car, just say a Buick LeSabre, I still recommend, and it's below, say, a 2010, I still recommend the 3-month, 3,000 miles.
Yeah.
When it gets on up there, and especially if it's a vehicle that you're using that calls for full synthetic oil, and you're using it in the 5,000 range is good, and some cars do go are fine with higher than that.
Right.
So I definitely recommend consulting your service advisor and your manual to make a decision. Of course, you want to take into account if you're in dusty condition, pulling a trailer. You also want to use the correct weight and type oil that you're supposed to use. But oil changes are still very important, and that is something that you want to have a couple of methods to make sure you do. Like the oil sticker is still my favorite.
Yeah.
Never hurts if you drive the same amount of miles each month to stick it in your little contact PDF or phone. Put it in your phone, and then also most places send out letters when it's due. Are we ready to go to the callers?
Yeah, let's go over to Robert.
Hey, Robert, I see you have a 2011 Jeep Compass, and what is it doing?
It's got that CVT, that, I don't know what it's called, transmission.
Yes,
and
golf cart
over
transmission.
Over the past couple of years, my daughter goes to school about 3 hours away, and that transmission fluid, I guess, the transmission will overheat and go into limp mode. And we've taken it to a couple of different dealerships and been back and forth, and finally, I guess they got some kind of Blue Star tech sheet from Chrysler, and they replaced the cooling block. That seemed to work for a little while, and then this past summer when she went back to school, it did it to her again. So when she got over to Alabama, took it to the Jeep dealership over there and had them flush the transmission fluid. She came home this weekend, so that seemed to help. But I'm just wondering, is there any kind of long-term solution, a bigger cooling block, a better cooling block? Or am I just going to have to keep doing this over and over again?
Robert, do you know the first time and the second time if it was the same codes or what the codes were listed for as far as the issue with the transmission?
Well, and that was the thing that was kind of squirrely, is they said there were no codes, and they'd have to keep it for a while and drive. And I was like, look, you're going to have to drive it for about an hour before you get to do anything. And
right.
So finally, like I said, I went back and forth with them for 3 or 4 months and got online, called Chrysler, and they said, no, there's a tech sheet on or something. So I don't know that they ever really pulled any codes from it.
Right. The only reason I ask is because there's quite a few things that would make that vehicle go into limp mode. No doubt temperature is one of them, but also there's been some issues with the temperature sensors on the vehicle too. You could be getting a false reading saying it's overheating and it's not. That transmission, the solenoids that control the CVT have been known to fail also. Same thing, put it in limp mode. So that would be the best thing. Not that I hope it acts up again, but if it's possible, next time it does act up, if she can drive straight to a facility wherever in the area she's in that could read that transmission, because a lot of times the codes will be pending and sometimes they'll be current, sometimes they'll be history, and the further you drive it, the more key cycles, meaning off and on, that you do, the less chances of a technician finding that code. Because especially if it goes in limp mode, it has to set a code. There's no way for it to go in limp mode unless it
John
sets
Ryan,
a code.
is that the model that's got the temp sensor and the solenoids all built in one block?
It's similar to that, but it's CVT. So as far as electronics, it's basically the same, but as far as the inside, it's different. So,
but I was just trying to remember how that one was set up.
Yeah. But Robert, that's key for a technician, is finding out exactly what is the trouble code that the car is seeing, because of course it doesn't agree with something. That's why it's putting it in limp mode.
Right, and so it will definitely, when it goes to limp mode, it will store the code in some kind of history for them to find.
Yes, absolutely, because that's the only way for limp mode to turn on, if you will, for it to of course find a code that it doesn't agree, because obviously the entire powertrain is computer controlled, so it could see something it doesn't agree with the engine. It could see a RPM signal that's way higher than what it wants to see, so it could put it in limp mode. It could see a output speed sensor issue with the transmission. It could see the temperature. There's so many valuable variables that it could set that.
Robert, when it does this, does she just pull over, cut the key off, and crank it back up, and it goes again?
Nah, and that's the thing that bothers me is, I don't want her to be somewhere wrong place, wrong time when this thing goes in limp mode. She pulls over.
Right.
Because she's usually on I-20, usually about an hour and a half away, it'll start doing it. Is when it doesn't. She'll pull over for about 15 minutes, and I guess it cools down enough, and then she'll go again.
Right.
And that's how I just didn't understand why they did. They said it didn't have any codes, and they needed to keep it and drive it and see if they could get it to,
Right.
go
And
on the
then
limit
another
when
thing
they
you
can.
mentioned, especially if it's been to the dealership, I'm sure this has been done. But Chrysler is one of the, I guess, the better vehicle manufacturers that releases updates for their controllers, meaning the TCM, which is Trans Control Module, and the PCM, Powertrain Control Module. You wouldn't believe that we could have a car in here on a Monday and check it for a calibration file and see what software is loaded in it, and then have it that very next Monday, and there'll be a whole different file in there. So something like that would be a good idea, because a lot of times they address some issues with software, just like a Windows update on your computer.
And Robert, I will mention one thing. There is one thing that from time to time happens, and it can cause it to go in limp home mode, but won't set a code, and that is the computer.
Well, that's true.
That's what
Very
we say
true.
is the computer will tell on everybody else, but it won't tell on itself. So if it did not show codes in there at all, and it was in limp home mode,
Yeah.
I'm leaning toward the computer itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that big ticket item, I guess.
It can be, but it's cheaper than a transmission.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not as bad as you think. Plus, sometimes you can get reman units, so
Right.
it just depends on if you can get a reman or not. And if they make a reliable one, I wouldn't just go get any reman. If you got one, you'd want it from a good, reliable company. But they're not as bad as you think they are.
Okay, so possibly temperature sensor, the solenoid, or
Yeah,
maybe
the
an
best-
update for the TCM.
The best thing for you, Robert, is definitely trying to get that code out of that system that's turning it into limp mode, because that'll just send the technician right to the area, do some tests, and figure it out for you. But
Okay?
And then if there's no code, it's likely the computer itself.
very well could be.
That's
Yes, sir.
my opinion.
Okay. Well, I do appreciate y'all's help.
All right, Robert. Thanks for the call.
Robert, great call. Thank you. Okay, the number to call is 706-863-5800. We're going to take a real quick break. When we return, we'll mention a common maintenance item. We'll be right back after this. And welcome back to the C&C Auto Show. John Ryan is singing about my Miata.
Oh, is that what it was? I was thinking something a little more American.
Batteries store energy that's needed to start your car's engine, and once the engine's running, the alternator starts recharging the battery for the next start. Maintenance includes keeping the battery clean, secured, so it don't vibrate all around while it's hitting bumps and such, and keeping the connections clean and tight at the terminals. And it says check water level, but
Yeah,
you don't do that
it's kind of
very
a thing of the
often.
past now.
Yeah, you don't see many batteries that have to check the water on anymore. If you have a question about your car, truck, and SUV, we would absolutely love to answer that question, or at least give you some input on the subject. And that's 8:05 to 10 Eastern on any Saturday morning from anywhere that you might be. And again, the number 706-863-5800. John Ryan, who will we be talking to?
Let's go over to James.
James, I hear that you have a 85 Chevrolet K30, and what can we help you with on that car?
Actually, it's the military version that has the J code 6.2.
All right.
And I seem to be losing some coolant. I'm afraid it's a cracked head. I've done everything. I've done pressure tests. I'm not getting a bunch of steam at all, but I have, and it's not in the oil.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have any other, I have no idea where it's going.
James, which engine's in this one?
It's a farm truck, so I don't drive it a whole lot. You know, I've driven it down to Savannah and back a couple times. It runs great, but I just have to keep an eye on it. And it's not a lot of coolant. You know, it'll be maybe a gallon. Of course, you know that coolant system is huge,
Right.
so a gallon's really not that significant in that side of the cooling system. But I've just run out of options of where it's going.
I think you got a cow out there playing a joke on you.
James, which engine's in this one?
It's the J code 6.2 diesel.
Okay. It's very possible, like you mentioned, the cracked heads. Those are kind of known for cracked heads. When you said you've had it pressure tested before,
Yes.
how long does it maintain pressure? Say if you pumped it up to 15 psi or so.
Um,
Is it a real slow, gradual? You know.
Yeah, it's a long, it's a slow gradual. It held pressure for, I guess, 10 minutes.
Okay.
Is all it held pressure on it?
Right. And you never see anything external or anything like that?
No, sir.
Okay, I can tell you that, no doubt those are kind of hard ones to find. What we do on vehicles like that, a lot of times we'll put engine coolant dye in the system itself. That way, if we're suspecting it's a head, of course, if it is going into the oil, or say if it's even the bridge where it goes in between the intake, of course, if the dye's in there, it could go into the oil, and you shine your light on the oil, after you drive it for a little bit to see if it's there. The other thing, of course, being a diesel, it's kind of hard to do this. Obviously, if it was a gasoline, you would just pump it up, put it under pressure, remove the spark plugs, and then you could look for coolant in the cylinders. That's not exactly as easy as said, being a diesel.
Right.
Does it smoke at all or anything like that, aside from just diesel smoke? No?
I've only got like 56,000 miles on it.
Okay.
So it's a military surplus vehicle. I bought it from a guy up in the mountains who he used it for his company to be able to go places he couldn't go with nothing else. So.
Right. The only other suggestion I have, if the leak could not be found, which, of course, there are some leaks that can't be found just simply because of where they're located, especially if it's, like you said, a cracked head, or, just using just a little bit of coolant. But there is a tablet. It's not the stop leak. It's none of that kind of stuff. We really don't advise any of that stuff. But AC Delco, which of course General Motors products, sells and makes coolant tabs, and they're an organic tab.
Kind of a conditioner.
It's a conditioner, and actually it's safe enough for GM to actually recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
They used to recommend it for a lot of the North Star engines with the aluminum blocks. And basically what it would do was fill the very minor pores that, coolant could seep through. And it's been a very good aid at odd problems like this.
Like a Teflon coating.
Yeah, it's like
it's
a coating to where it, of course, goes in all the little minute cracks and pinholes and stuff like that, and just restricts them. The reason we don't like stop leak is, of course, stop leak does just that. It stops the leak, but it also stops the heater core up.
And the radiator.
Up and all that, mainly because the particles that are used are a little bit bigger. So that's one tip. But I mean, the biggest thing, of course, we like to fix them, not necessarily put a Band-Aid on it. So
James, I do have one other thing now. It don't sound like your leak would be hard enough or leaking enough for this to show up anything at all, but it is a thought, and I've done this before, and that would be if you wanted to get really serious about the issue, let all the oil drain out of the engine down to as much as you can get out, and then put a pressure test on the system and put a clean pan underneath it. If you see coolant drip out, in that pan, then that means that coolant is getting inside the engine itself and going in. Right. It takes a lot of coolant before it ever really shows up good in the oil. Right. And so you may...
And James, that's one reason why a lot of our technicians have switched to, of course, the conventional, pressure tester is just a hand pump. You pump it up. Well, now they have them to where they're regulated and they hook to the air hose. So, of course, they can leave them on there for hours for that very reason, instead of standing over it, pumping it. So
yeah. So that would be the routes to go.
I bypassed the heater core, and I've got fresh hoses on it. New radiator. Now, those big, huge brass radiators don't keep.
Of course, there are cracks that will only open up, or certain
with
instances
heat, yeah.
The head only lifts up once it gets hot. If you have something like that, you may have something very difficult to locate.
Yeah.
But those others would be the step to go. That dye is not a bad thing to try. Now, of course, you need an ultraviolet light. You'll need an ultraviolet glasses. And do it, but that stuff has come down in price now. You can buy all that reasonably cheap. Most technicians have them,
right?
And put some dye in the coolant, and you can trace it down. And then also, if after that you see some dye on one of your cow's hoofs, you'll know for sure what's going on.
For sure.
I don't have any cows.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever. You're on a farm, so whatever animals you got.
But I do have two other real quick questions. I have a little play in a transmission from like park, and it just kind of rocks a little bit after you put it in park. And it's got the 400 automatic, and I'm running the Dana 60 front and the 14 volt free float rear with 456. I've got the 31s in it.
Right.
And I'm not really hard on it. I just use it for hauling heavy stuff, dragging a few trees here and there. I don't really I don't mud it or anything like that.
Right.
So I've got 31s on it. They're not really that aggressive, and I don't have it lifted. So it's all stock as far as, the fenders have been trimmed a little bit to get 31 or 33s on it, but I just don't got that little bit of plate.
Well, it could be.
Would that be more the parking, Paul?
Right. That's what I was going to mention. It could be kind of a few things that kind of tie all together. Of course, say if you have a little bit of play in the parking pawl, which isn't uncommon. Of course, most vehicles rock just a little bit. And then say the gear lash in the transfer case, it's got a little bit. And then the backlash of the differential, the rear differential. All those minor things, of course, add up. Now, of course, you could jack the rear wheels up and kind of just put your hand on everything and feel the play in between the ring and the pinion. That would kind of give you an idea if it could be there. And then the same thing for the transfer case. But, if everything's doing okay, there's no driveline noises, no vibrations, I'd kind of put that out of my
And then
mind.
just consider using your parking brake on a regular basis, and that'll keep it from getting worse on there.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a rated at 1.25 ton, and I'm pretty push that kind of regular. So.
Sure. All right, James.
I just want to be sure, I'm kind of iffy on it. I don't want anything to break when I'm hauling.
Exactly. You got work to do.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
All right,
we
thanks,
appreciate
sir.
the call. All right, Aaron.
Oh, great questions. Okay, I'm gonna mention something real quick. Is that about a week ago? It was kind of neat. I went by a friend's place, Dan Patterson over at Audubon Automotive. I pulled in and I was going to talk with him a little bit. He's really good with Audis, VWs, and a lot of other vehicles. But I pulled in and talked with him. He said, "Aaron, you got to ride in this thing." Got into a little Audi. I almost forgot what it was, but anyway, it was like a twin turbo. Got in that thing, and he said, "Just ride around the block with me." Next thing I know, he punched that joker, and it looked like Star Wars. Woo! It was really neat. That thing had over 600 horsepower.
Oh wow!
And I had to tell him to just do it one more time, and he did. But that was a lot of fun. I love riding in neat cars.
All right.
Okay, it's time for a real quick break. When we return, we'll take more calls, but also we'll be talking about brakes, and we'll be right back after these messages.
I began to understand there's something women like about a pickup man.
Something women like about a pickup man. Great song. Okay, we mentioned it when we returned. We mentioned a few words about brakes, and brakes normally give you a little bit of warning when they're due for something. You'll if you have a spongy pedal,
Or if you hit the trash can or something like that.
Yeah, if you hit the trash can when you're pulling into your driveway, that might mean some hydraulic issues. Brake flush sometimes can make that feel a lot better.
Right.
But definitely check the hydraulic system. And if a warning light comes on, either ABS, you might have a code stored, might be a sensor of some kind.
Right.
And just if you're hearing a scraping or a grinding noise,
It's not supposed to be like that.
no, this is not supposed to do that. That
And
could
I
be
think
brake
you need
pads.
to read the tech tip again.
Oh, all right. We will read that again, and we will see if we come up with an answer this time. Adrian and Billy are both 29 years old. Adrian was inside her house watching TV. Her husband, Billy, went out to her 2013 Ford Focus to check to see if it was due for an oil change. Something happened when he was checking the mileage that caused Adrian and Billy to go back to school for a year. What happened while Billy was checking the mileage on the Ford Focus? And if you know the answer to that, you will be eligible to win our Tech Tip Quiz shirt and prize package. And John Ryan, who will we be talking to?
Looks like up next is Jim.
Hello, Jim. I see you have a 06 F-150, and what is it doing to you?
You have one of those too.
Yeah, the brake light comes on and it goes off kind of intermittently, and I've had the brakes checked and they're fine, and the fuel gauge is not working either. Sometimes it'll read full, it'll read empty. Doesn't matter, how much gas is in it. It reads whatever it wants to.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, did they find anything with the brake inspection? Did everything look okay?
Yeah, they said the brakes were fine.
Okay. I just wonder, there's two things that can cause that light on if it's the light that I'm thinking. Of course, you're talking about the red light that comes on that says brake, obviously.
Or is it amber colored?
Or is it amber?
No, it's red. It says brake, and like I said, the other thing is the fuel gauge. Just
Right.
I can fill up, it'll go way past full, and then if I shut the car off, turn it back on, it'll be at empty.
Right.
Um,
As far as the brakes concerned, I just wonder what the fluid level and condition is. There's only two items that turn that light on, one being the parking brake itself, which of course has a little micro switch on it. When you press the pedal, it of course, depresses, well, actually lets go of the switch and turns that light on. The other one is the fluid level indicator that's in the master cylinder. There's a little float just like in the top of a toilet. When the fluid is full, of course it makes contact with the switch and then turns the light off. So what we see a lot of times, especially if it's an intermittent problem like that, if the fluid's just right
like
at
at
that
the minimum
line and you take a turn, then of course the fluid kind of sloshes to one
Or on
side.
a cold morning, the fluid is contracted a little bit,
Yep.
so it'll show a little lower.
Right, so that could be a possibility. And then, of course, there's the possibility of a wiring issue in between there. So that's kind of along the lines of what we look at as far as for the red brake light. Now, the fuel gauge, those unfortunately have been kind of a notorious issue with those trucks. Just to be sure, now this gauge, does it actually go past full? Like even the gauge doesn't even line up with the letters on the gauge panel?
Yes, it'll go past full, it'll go
Right.
past empty.
Yeah, so there's a little stepper motor in there that actually controls that needle, just a tiny little motor that, of course, apply voltage one way it goes full, apply voltage the other way it goes to, of course, low. What happens is the stepper motor does not have a stop anymore, and it can almost go right around, and it gets out of calibration. So, with that being said, there's a lot of tests that needs to be performed to actually make sure of that, because you want to make sure the level sender inside the fuel tank is sending the right readings, which is a resistance measurement. And then, of course, you want to do a sweep test with the scan tool to make sure all the other gauges are working properly. But just based on the vehicle you have and how common they are, I would tend to say that the instrument panel would have to be replaced for that. Years ago, you could replace each individual gauge. Now, unfortunately, they made it to where it's one whole panel with all the gauges on it.
But sometimes you can get a reman unit with all of them on.
Right. The only important thing to know about that is it does have to be reprogrammed. Using the factory software, of course, there's a program procedure to where you have to relearn the VIN into that new module. Just, again, being a rolling computer, everything needs to be
Mileage,
programmed,
all of that
mileage,
good
the whole 9 yards, tire size,
Right.
everything.
Mm-hmm.
So,
All right, is that something y'all do?
yes, sir, we do.
And just a ballpark, how much would something like that run?
Whoa, now that varies so much from
Yeah.
car to car. And it varies whether you can get a reman, which I believe on that model you would be able to get a
Yeah.
reman. So there's so many factors involved. I'm going to just throw a really wild figure out there in the 400 to 600 range.
I think that's close.
Yeah, which is,
Okay.
again, that's really wild. But that gives you an idea on if it's
Right.
like big time or
Yeah.
kind of medium.
It's not 5,000, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, and I'll probably be giving y'all a call to bring it in the next couple of weeks.
Jim,
Great
great
question.
questions, and we appreciate the call. John Ryan, who will we talk to now?
I think we're going to go over to John.
Hey, John, welcome to the C&C Auto Show. I see you have a 2013 Durango, and what is it doing to you?
It's a 2014, Aaron, and got a problem. It's kind of hard to explain. When I hit the start button, it has always started right up and no problem.
Mm-hmm.
In the past 2 weeks, when I hit the button, I can hear the starter going. Like, on your program, when you start that engine, you can hear the starter grind.
Yeah.
It sounds like that.
45 miles per hour.
It
Not
only
that
does
one.
it...
Oh, he put the slow starting one on. Yours is spinning over fast, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I took it to the dealer. They said everything's okay with the battery and everything. That was my first thought.
Mm-hmm.
However, when I got home and turned it off, I checked the onboard engine check thing,
Mhm.
and it says the battery is reading less than 8 volts, and that has me concerned. But it starts, okay. It's just that every now and then I can hear that starter engaging and winding.
there is a chance that you may have a weak battery. I mean, it's something that's fairly easy to test,
Right.
and just a real quick load test to tell. Now, the biggest thing that I'm trying to determine is when you push the button, does the engine spin over quickly, like whoop, 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 or does it go whoop, 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 and then whoop, whoop, and then go?
Oh no, it starts.
Okay,
Except for that,
it's spinning
every
over
now and
quickly
then.
then.
it spins over and starts just instant.
John Ryan's laughing at my sound skills.
Sound like Three Stooges.
Yeah. So it sounds like more than likely the battery's good, but it wouldn't be a bad thing to check it since you did see that deal that said 8 volts on there. The next thing is things that I'm sure that's going to be good on your vehicle. Anytime a vehicle spins over a little longer to start, I always like to start with the basics, making sure that the vehicle's not due for a maintenance tune-up. I don't think you have to replace the fuel filter on that model. It's not a replaceable type filter. Of course, the air filter, things like that. And then the next step, I would check for bulletins, service bulletins. Sometimes it might be something like a reprogram procedure that may help the vehicle to start faster. So going through that step-by-step process is what I'd recommend on that one.
Well, you guys have done most of the maintenance on it, the flushes and all that.
Yeah.
My other thought was that 8 volts has me worried, but my other thought was that possibly the fuel pump is going bad and not picking up fuel right away.
It's possible, but we really don't run into too terribly many fuel pumps on that model. Right. Yeah, I would go through all the other processes first, and then find out if there's any bulletins that might show us anything.
Would that show up on the onboard computer when they check it?
No. No. You look at a different spot during the process, looking at all the other items first, checking codes and all the other things. And then once all the basics are done, then we go to a different computer, and it lets us know if any bulletins have been issued for the vehicle. And we'll be watching extra close for ones that may have been extra start. John,
we're all out of time, man.
Yeah, we are. Hey, John, great question, and don't hesitate to give us a call. And it is time to take the time clock's on E. We'll need to pull over for now. I'm Aaron Clements with co-host John Ryan Mooney, our show producer, Dominic Frito, and Sandy Klein, and Zach Llewellyn's our engineer. We appreciate all you that tuned in, logged in, and especially those that called in to ride with us on the C&C Auto Show.